we're very thankful for Title IX, including some type of amendment should be considered here because it works and it really helps, and that would be, another way to keep these young girls in sports. And then the other part was the importance of education. Again, my main thing was writing down my goals, and what I would do in education, I would write down my short-term goals, the class that I had the worst grade in, so I had like a 3.5 or 3.7. Wasn't a straight A student until I got my master's, but I was a very good student, and I would do my worst subject first, which was the best thing that I ever came up with, because my worst subject meant that was how I was able to improve my grades. And the balancing of that was that in the United States you have to have a grade point average of a 2.0, which is really not that great. That's a C average. I'm surprised it's so low now that I think back. But I think just the thought of having to meet a certain standard really pushes a lot of athletes to learn to balance both. And it really pushed me, because then when I thought 2.0, no, I want to do better than that. And so, of course, I'm competitive, and I was going for straight A's, which I never got. But I tried. So I think the importance of balancing them both. Again, women in sports, we have to work harder. I'm not saying that our males, let me put this right. Not that they don't work hard, but they get to play 1 year of college and then they go to the pros, and we can see sometimes in their games that they clearly need to stay in college longer. But for women, we have to stay in college to get into the WNBA. You have to do, I believe you have to finish your 4 years of college, which could be done, or be the age of 22. So even our standards are already higher and different. So I think the importance of education, no one can take that away from you. You never know when you're going to get hurt, and that's what I would always think about. You remember when I was playing, there was no WNBA. Most of the women played overseas, and I was clearly not going to do that in my head. So I wanted to be an Olympian. That was my main goal. When I say I wrote down my 5-year goal, it was to be an Olympian. And so I wanted to be a model, so I signed a modeling contract like that. I wanted to do so many things that I knew being educated and figuring out how to manage money was going to be key for me. And I think that athletes in general, both men and women, have to think beyond where they are in the sport. Because if we look at our statistics, especially in the U.S., many of our men have gone bankrupt within the next 5 years since they retired. The majority of them in football, baseball, and basketball. And that's because they have no idea how to manage money. So, let me give you a scenario. They signed a $20 million contract. Wow, all their friends and parents hear about that. Okay? You have to give Uncle Sam half of that. Okay? They don't process that. So they have $10 million, right? We haven't bought anything. Well, they probably bought some jewelry and some clothes and somebody a house. Don't think about the taxes. Before you know it, they buy at least a $3 to $5 million home. You already know the guardian alone on that, right? It's just a bad management of money. So they have no idea and concept, and why? Because you take these young men who've never had money, they're first generation to have money, they have no concept of how to manage money, and then they turn over their signing rights to someone else to manage their money who steals some of it. And it's just really a cycle that is never ending. Okay, I'm like a mom right now. I feel like my mom. I'm just telling you guys all kind of stuff. But it's just really, it goes back to my point of education and the fact that we don't stress that enough or seek it to understand and not make the same mistake. So we're trying to do better with getting a lot of our players more education about this and to understand, but it really is a shame that people could make that much money and not do better with it than throwing it at strippers and spending it out. Sorry. It's probably getting past my bedtime. Next question. I haven't had a drink yet.
My name is Angela Roca, and I'm a Paralympic athlete in track and field, and I just want to say thank you so much for your remarks and for your value on education. Like yourself, I also have achieved master's degree, actually PhD as well, and also become a leader in my sport. So my question is, as you're a current athlete and a leader in your sport and active in your MGB and on the international level as well and within your team, As you're preparing to transition sort of from that current athlete mentality, how do you sort of maintain that leadership? And what advice do you have for someone like myself who's now put in 2 games worth and looking ahead now to transition outside of sort of being more in that active role? And what advice do you have to still remain active?
Yes, that's a great question. First off, congratulations to you and all of your accomplishments. You know, I always say it's important to do what you're passionate about and do what you would do for free. So those things, you know, if you gotta do what makes you happy. It's about the pursuit of happiness. I'm saying I don't care, that's not a good word. I don't mind. You can do whatever job, whether it's being, I don't want to say anybody's pay or whatever scale. It's not about that. It's about what are you happy about? What makes you smile every day? And I find that that's what I do. I do what I want to do, and I do what I'm passionate about, regardless of what it pays or doesn't pay and all of that. And so I would say the same thing. You're a natural leader. And as a leader, you pick things and companies and organizations and nonprofit organizations to link yourself with. You're a champion. Find other people who are winning in the world, and that's who you link with. That's what I've done with, whether it's UPS or with Capital One, with Nike, with companies that I find, and it's not just to be paid, but it's also to say, hey, you can make calls and say, I see that you guys have this program. Almost every company has a nonprofit program. Almost every company, you can look up and say, I wanted to volunteer, I would like to speak. If you have X, Y, and Z going on, or organizations, if you guys have anything, I would like to volunteer. You just start to make, I think, these types of relationships by putting yourself in places where you feel that's where you're most comfortable. I love kids. That comes natural for me, so I usually do a lot of things dealing with kids. I'm the spokesperson for American Federation for Children. And what that means is in the United States, our kids have to go to school in the same zip code of where they live. I don't know if you guys have this or not, but what happens is you have all of these kids that have to stay in their area, which it affects a lot of inner city kids, when there may be a school performing better across the street, and they are not allowed to go because of their zip code. And I feel like for free choice, school choice is important. That why, if the government doesn't choose our church and our grocery store, why should they choose our schools? You should, and every kid doesn't, you know, they're not educated the same. You may have some schools or some students who need to be homeschooled because they just don't act well, you know, in the whole group. They just don't. I mean, some of these kids have so many different things going on, or some kids, maybe they need to be in a private school. They need more discipline and structure, and you have some that need to be sort of in a Montessori where they're free thinkers and they're, you know, everybody doesn't necessarily learn the exact same way, and we've understood that through testing, but why can't we release these children? So I teamed up with the American Federation for Children. I love speaking on that topic. I'm passionate about it. The school that I went to when I was in high school, we have a test called the SAT. I don't know if this is, yeah? Okay, I feel like I'm in a whole other country and I'm speaking chopped up English. I'm sorry, you guys. But, so the SAT, you know, it's a very difficult test. But we had never done anything studying towards this SAT test. So they tell me, you know, in order to go to college, you gotta pass this test. So I'm thinking, I'm hot, you know, I got a 3.7, give me the test. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? I've never had these words, I've never seen these words. Okay, I can do the math, but it was just, to me, it was mind-blowing. So of course, me being me, I had a little short press conference. And I'm like, there's a problem here. There's a problem because I don't understand why I'm struggling with a test that if I'm one of the top students in this school, why can't I pass this test? You know, and I passed it, but it was not good. I mean, I don't want to repeat my scores. It wasn't great. I want to be great, and I wanted to understand why wasn't I prepared to be great. And I didn't understand. I was in 11th grade. You know, I was young. I was fussing and fighting, being an advocate still. But I didn't understand why. It's because the school that I'm in was ranked like 300 and something. It wasn't the best education. My 3.7 would be a C plus probably at the university. I didn't know this. I was a kid. And it's unfortunate that from an educational standpoint, these are the types of situations that we have. So I'm fighting for kids because I want for kids to be able to have the best education possible. Why should we be restricted based on our zip code?